So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success story series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders, their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what's really driving them forward. And this morning, I'm delighted to have with us David Hall, who's the Managing Director at YFM Equity Partners. So firstly, David, thank you so much for coming on board this morning. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and YFM to the audience, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Chris. So I'm David Hall, or Dave is normally what I'm called. My mum calls me David, but very few other people do. I'm from the northwest of England. I'm a butcher's son from Salford, and I run YFM, which is a business that invests in young growing businesses in the UK. We're 40 years old as a business this year. Yeah. We've backed hundreds of businesses. Lots of those businesses have been on exciting journeys, and we've got a few £100 million under management, and we invest quite a lot of it in the north of England, and we only invest in UK, investing in people's dreams, future and their ambitions.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And I lived in Salford for a little while, David, a long time ago. We used to love going down a few places, changed a lot since then, as we know.
As indeed.
Yeah. So just as we start, if you kind of maybe tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got into business and why this particular one.
Yeah, sure. Well, as I said, I was born in Salford, although my parents actually were split. One came from Salford and one came from Manchester, and my dad lived to 92, and he would always point out that Salford, which is where he was from, is the slightly older city by 6 years, and that remained an important thing all the way through. It also meant, coming from Salford, that he was United and that my mum, who comes from Manchester, was City. So that was a constant difference. I now support Wigan Athletic. So I grew up in and around the northwest of England. Went to university here in Manchester, and it's quite interesting in terms of what did I want to do? I actually had no real idea. I was pretty vague. Certainly all the way through. Sort of secondary school, and even perhaps into university, where I just drifted into what I did. I did accountancy because basically I could add up and take away, and those are about the skills that I had. And it's quite interesting about, sometimes you get asked, is this a job that you want to do? And one thing that I tell our kids, we've got 3 kids, all the time, is that when I was growing up, the job that I do now didn't exist. So you couldn't aspire to it because there was pretty much no such thing as venture capital or private equity at all. So I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at all. I was a bit geeky. So what did I do? I used to, for reasons that I now have no idea whatsoever, I used to record all the attendances at every football match in the UK and run averages. Avidly watch Multicolour Swap Shop and try and send in things that we didn't want from the house anymore. But I had no real drive at all. I quite liked history, and I knew that was quite good, and I was rubbish at languages. So, and that was the characteristics that I took with me into university. And as I then did accountancy at university, I drifted into accountancy. And when you start in accountancy, the thing that you're doing in all the firms is you were checking the past. That was the main thing. And then when you got a little bit more, when you qualified, you got for a day to go and meet this other person who wasn't in the accounts department and wasn't checking the past, because what you're trying to do was to get a risk overview of the business. And that person that you met seemed to be looking forward all the time and wanting to change stuff. And that was the managing director. So I kind of thought, what job can I get where I spend more of my time with, in the technical term, the looky forward people than the looky back people? And that is how I ended up in venture capital and equity, because those were the people that you dealt with all the time. They kept coming in and they had plans, and their plans are all about the looking forward and changing the future. And that's how I ended up. So I can't say in any way, shape or form it was something I designed, I wanted to do, but I found I fell into it, and it was a bit like when I first met my wife. We kind of knew it was what we wanted. This was the way forward. This is what we had to do. It was the right thing.
Fantastic. And I'm so looking forward to this discussion because, I mean, it's interesting. I often speak to people about financial numbers mastery, as you're rightly saying. And I often find people don't even really have effective reporting, i.e. looking backwards numbers, and they many businesses don't at all. But I say even then, it's a bit like driving. If all you've got is historical information, it's a bit like driving a car by only looking in the rearview mirror. So you can see the road behind you, so you sort of assume there's a road in front of you, but you can't see the bend in the road, and so totally aligned with that. What before? I'm quite key. Obviously, as an investor, what would you say are some of the key, one or two of the key forward-looking numbers or numbers that you would look at a business to deem it whether it's likely to be successful or not? Hopefully that's not a trick question, but I'm just keen.
Not at all. But I think so. So I said I grew up a bit geeky and a bit numbery and a bit pattern recognition sort of guy.
Yes.
Actually, it's the numbers aren't the first thing that we look at in a business, and I'm sure we'll come on we might come on to around the theme as to things you look for and what's in a business and all those things, and what advice you might give people and all that good stuff. But in the main, if business is about providing people with stuff. That's a highly technical venture capital term, right? But effectively, all businesses exist to provide a service or a solution. I mean, there's lots of things that get in the way of all that sort of stuff. So what you're really looking for is, what is it that these people are doing to meet the customer's needs? Is it improving their lives? Is it improving their business? Is those sorts of things. So what is the particular thing that you are doing, or a service or solution? And then how does that compare to what other people are doing? So what you can do, and the higher the level of innovation and in that, then ultimately, potentially, the bigger the value that you're providing. Also, there's the bigger the risk, because the high levels of innovation, things haven't been tried and tested that much, and therefore everyone gets a bit sort of, the number that everybody really then focuses on, in how much do you think you'll need? And the reality is, very few businesses that we ever invest in call that number correctly at the start, because we don't know and they don't know. You've got a rough idea of how much it might be, and everybody focuses on how much we think we need today. But ultimately, there's another number. The amount of money that it took to get the first moon landing wasn't the thing that people were thinking about. We just have to get to the moon, and if we get there, some stuff's going to follow. The same thing's true, and the same is true when you apply that to businesses. When Facebook first started, they had no idea in the end how much capital it was going to consume in order to be able to get there, but they knew the stuff they had to be able to do. So there's lots of stages in that journey that you can look at, but in the end, it's not the numbers that you're looking at. What you're looking at is, what's the thing that you're doing that is delighting your customers, and how does that compare to what anybody else is doing? Is anybody doing it at all in that way, or is nobody doing it at all?
Brilliant. It's interesting. It reminds me, I was lucky enough to hear Sir Terry Matthews speak a few years ago. He probably knows, the first Welsh billionaire. And somebody in the audience asked him, just said, what's your secret to business? And he said, well, look, and he said, I know this sounds really simple, but I went out and asked my customers what they wanted, and I got it for them. And it was just like, I know, as simple as that. It's a bit of a light bulb moment, isn't it? Let's make sure we're solving a problem or providing a product that meets a need that exists and potentially will grow. But
it is, but it doesn't half save you a lot of time, because if you sit at home trying to draw out what you think somebody's problem is and design it yourself, and then say, right, here it is, I have now built. Here is the cart that I have built, and it's got square wheels because it's perfect. And then you go and take your cart with square wheels and try for years to sell it, and then it's only, and you spend all your time then with people who don't buy it, and then you just go and find somebody else who doesn't buy it. So actually try and, do learn from the customers and let them shape what they want, and just just mold. He said exactly. So that advice and what he said there, I would entirely concur with. Just go and ask them what they want and give it to them.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So looking back, obviously, YFM's been around for 40 years, which is amazing. I don't know how long you've been with it for, or
just over 20.
Just over 20, brilliant. So what are some of the biggest challenges you've had to come over that period, whether that's at YFM or yourself, Dave?
Well, it's interesting about things to overcome. Like I said to you before, in a way, so when you talk about, we talk increasingly now in business, which I think is a good thing, about just people. So as opposed to, your business you and your home you're just you. Right? And so in many respects, so I'm being very lucky in terms of things I've not had to overcome. I've had very long-lived parents. I was asked out by a woman who was absolutely stunning and perfect, and I've been married to her for nearly 30 years. We've got 3 great kids, and that provides a real anchor. So I think if you then look at the biggest issue that I had to overcome, that personally I think I overcame, is a real middle class sort of thing, which is where I said to you before, I was a bit vague and I didn't really know what to do. I had no direction or focus or indeed, particularly at that time, drive. That wasn't anything that so actually finding something that gave me things that I didn't actually realize I had turned out to be really a really good start for me personally, and from there everything builds. I think one of the things, the issues that you then find and what sort of makes business and people, I think one of the things that I've learned over time is, in terms of is that nothing happens without people. So business is in fact only people, but people, we often talk about, even in equity, about not backing people businesses. I don't know any business that operates at all without a single human being in it.
Yes.
So the challenges in business generally come out of the people issues. Well, I've heard that there are phrases that people use, like, there are only 2 issues in business: people and issues that you haven't realized are people yet. So, and therefore dealing with people is quite important. And probably the biggest learning that I take from that, which helps overcome lots of things, is that everyone has a strength, and the real key is finding it. Right. And it's a lot better finding it, focusing on it, and playing to it, than trying to identify a whole pile of weaknesses and then try and manage them. And if you can get people playing to the strengths, somebody's strength is somebody else's weakness, then that kind of is what works, and that helps overcome most business challenges. And having somebody who, usually, in terms of any issue that you've got, and lots of issues tend to be around either not having enough money to do stuff, and some of that is either between frustration and immense stress, depending upon how big that funding gap is, and also whether you've built your business over a period of time. So to build something and lose it is actually sometimes much worse for people, as far as if they got that risk, and there's all sorts of pressures come on them. So finding people whose strengths are in the right places to that helps overcome those challenges.
Brilliant. That makes absolute sense. I think it's something we talked to people we work with about. I think it was Brian Tracy talked about the most successful organizations are the ones where most people spend most of their time doing the 3 things they really love and they're really good at, and delegate the rest. And we do a lot of work with delegation, and I think the thing that holds people up often, Dave, is that people think that stuff that they don't like, everybody doesn't like. But the reality is, something I don't like, somebody's absolutely going to love. I don't like doing this. I bet you find somebody that go, oh, I can't wait to do that, and therefore everyone is doing stuff that they really enjoy. A lot of people, interestingly, talk about numbers. A lot of people don't like to crunch numbers, but lots of people do. So let's find the people that love that, and we just get there so much easier. If we're not enjoying it, we rarely are as good as we would be doing something that we're really good at.
I again completely agree with that.
Brilliant. So people, obviously, a key one. Any other key learnings that you have around business that would be useful for people in general? I mean, I'm sure people are going to find this fascinating.
Well, I don't know if it's fascinating or not, but I genuinely find there aren't any problems that aren't better for having slept on it for a night. You know, almost any decision, you know, it's like just I don't know what happens, and you know, we've run these days we now run seminars on things like, you know, the neuroscience and neuro programming and how does the brain work, you know, and those sorts of thinking, you know, because that's quite important. I have not come up with an answer to it, but definitely there isn't anything where it's not felt better after a good night's sleep, and the decision's got either a bit more context or
Yes.
or anything. So I think, you know, try and do that, and that gives, you know, that gives perspective. I think. And I'd say, as I said before, I think it is that element of stopping and looking at people in there and look for their strengths. The third thing I would say, which is, and you can't, this isn't necessarily something that you can teach, but I think that having a low ego or humbleness means that you don't presume, and therefore the thirst for knowledge is a really important thing in terms of ultimately, the problems are generally not problems that are new, but they will be in a new context, and therefore being able to learn and not presume that you know all the answers, and that level of low ego, I think, is extremely helpful in business.
Brilliant. Yeah, you brought a couple of things to mind to me. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about the use of intuition, which feels like, you know, sleeping on something is almost let it settle within my intuition, not necessarily my analytical side, but just how does it feel and using that a bit more. And yeah, I think that could be really, really important. And it's funny, you know, we often say to people, you know, the two words "I know" can be the two most expensive words in business, because
knowledge is a strange thing. I did go. My youngest daughter went to when she was going around university. She's a bit like me. She's a bit list orientated. So she had a long list of universities, and one of the degrees she wanted to do was philosophy. And the three of the philosophy pitches I would have paid to go and see, but yeah, they were just pitching the course. But yes, one of the things that they asked him, one of the questions was, "What is knowledge? How do you know what you know?" And it's like, so yeah, and well, because somebody told it or read it in a book. Well, how do you know that they knew it? So what is knowledge? Is yeah, I mean, your head will explode as a result of that. But it is, you know, how do you know anything, you know, at all? You know, because it's, you know, it's a fact, isn't it? But where do facts come from? And is that just because somebody told somebody who told? And then what's different? And then you get to the difference between knowledge and belief, and then you can go off and do a philosophy degree, it seemed to me. But that bit about "I know," I think is quite right, because actually, what is knowledge? You don't know, and sometimes you've got to have a more open mind into finding a solution, because it's otherwise, yeah, because you do find times when you go down cul-de-sacs, and if you can't get out of the cul-de-sac, or as you do say, you can't see the wood for the trees, all that sort of stuff, then actually you just need to take time. But because there's generally human beings are extremely innovative. Well, the traits. There are some other traits as well, but we all have some other traits as well. But innovation is definitely one, and therefore, most things we can find a solution to, and we can achieve usually lots more than we think we can.
Yes.
But don't presume.
Yeah, bang on. Absolutely bang on. It is that challenge, isn't it? We all know what we know, but we don't obviously know what we don't know, and that's the bit.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was told this, and I've never found out whether it's absolutely true, but I was told that Tony Benn, Lord Benn, when he retired from the House of Parliament, he started doing a lot of speeches at primarily educational establishments and universities, etc. And he'd always start his speech by saying, "We all wake up in the morning knowing less than we knew the day before." And to which all the lecturers and all, so you can't say that here. We teach people stuff, and I think the thinking behind it was the amount of information the world is expanding exponentially so fast that our percentage of it is actually reducing over time. And when you think of it like that, it really makes me think, we've just the striving for lifelong learning, and I think that's been a facet of most really successful people I've spoken to and worked with and interviewed is that striving for lifelong learning as a habit is something that's really.
And people learn in very different ways as well. It's definitely not one size fits all. I mean, they do. Some people like to read lots. Some people just throw themselves into lots of different situations and experience new stuff. And there are lots of different ways to learn. So again, it's very much try to keep an open mind and see which one of those suits you best.
Yeah, brilliant. And you're probably aware we're a business coaching organization. We focus a lot on the coaching side of that with people in mind. And I'm keen to know who the best coaches you will have worked with, whether that's business, sports, or life in general.
Yeah, I think there's lots of people who've had really positive influences on my career. One or two have had negative influences, but there's one guy that I particularly is sort of maybe it was a time that I was in my career, I wasn't in his, and he wasn't really a coach, but he's the person I probably learned more from than anybody else. And he was chairman of one of our boards. It was a guy called Sir Andrew Hugh Smith, who got his surnus for basically doing Big Bang on the stock exchange. So he did that, and then he set up all the sort of what became the miners' corporate governance rules. So he was a bit of an eminence grise sort of character. Yeah, but there are two things in particular that stand out. I mean, there's lots of things that stand out for me, but this is only 20 minutes, not 2 days. But there's two things that I particularly think. Well, the first is he was what I call an everyman. So he was, he could definitely knob in the city, and he could definitely go around, and he gave speeches at the Mansion House, but he treated everyone exactly the same. There was nobody, and I actually remember when I went to his funeral, which is kind of, it brought all of that bit together, and it was basically the entire village and the surrounding villages all came, and everybody had a story that had equal weight about it. So he just treated everyone the same, and as a result of that, everyone's lives appeared to be better for that. As a result of that, the second thing though that he did, which I always remember, and there was another guy that there were the two of us. It was the then CEO of the business and myself. But we used to be able to walk. We'd sort of walk, and after about half an hour after the meeting, we'd sort of think, I think he told us off there. Do you think? But so what he had the knack of doing was just keeping you and just nudging the tiller and pointing it in the right direction, and you weren't in any way told off. People were just pointed out a different way to go. So he kind of moved from that good and bad distinction that people often draw. So it's not about goodness and badness. It's just like, don't categorize it like that. Just think about what we're trying to achieve here, and let's try it in a different way. And those things, and there was nothing, we did talk sometimes about success and failure, but in the context of the things that didn't go so well, so we're trying not to use the word failure, what do we learn from that? We learned a lot more from those, because clearly when it was successful, well, we were obviously brilliant, we knew it was right, so we didn't learn anything. So fantastic, but we did learn things from things that didn't go right. And kind of, those things always sort of stayed with me. And he was just a top bloke. And his wife was also, she was not from the business world at all. And she was really nervous about going into the business world, and particularly going to these sort of knobby doos with the big sort of, dress gowns and all that sort of stuff. But she was more popular than everybody else because she just talked about things that actually were real, that authentic you stuff, which actually everybody else wanted to talk about. They didn't want this stuff. They just wanted to be people. And that I don't know, that was a byproduct. That was just a happy lesson. They had a lot of dogs, so I'm not a big fan of dogs. They did have about 20 Labradors, but yeah.
Oh my God, that is no, that's a proper, that's a
Yeah,
herd.
yeah.
That's
He had a big house. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, this one. It's funny. You said, again, so Terry Matthews is a bit of a hero. I'm from Wales, so but I know we had that when I met him was actually at Celtic Manor.
Yeah.
And we'd part of got him to speak was Harry Celtic Manor. Anyway, it was a big event we had, and I remember we were being driven to some lodges on the estate then by the golf courses where we were staying. And the guy that was driving the buggy would say, yeah, so Terry, whatever he's doing, whenever he always has time to speak and chat and how things go and how can we make things better. Obviously, he lives in Ontario. He's not there all the time, but he would always have time for people. And
you just got to get a balance there. You see that whether Newport is now a town attached to a golf course as opposed to a golf course with a town.
Steady on. But the other thing that was really, I think is really interesting is how you describe Sir Andrew. For me, that is very much coaching, because coaching for me is drawing out of people helping people find their way forward, not telling them. So the fact that it was drawn out of you that maybe you'd had a telling off.
Absolutely.
It's feeling that I need to do something better rather than feeling bad because someone's told me off is absolute. It is very much a sort of a drawing out thing. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And through your career, are there any particular quotes or sayings that you use a lot or fall back on in either difficult or happy times?
Well, I try not to use obscure film references in films that people haven't watched too often. So we just end up playing games which are along the lines of what are your 5 top films where the remake is better than the original sort of game. So we play that sort of. I'll leave that with you. But anyway, Godfather 2 better than Godfather 1 is one of mine that I put in there. However, but there are a couple of things that have slipped into the lexicon over time, and 2 that I do kind of trot out regularly are what I know is finite, what I don't know is infinite, and those 2 things will always stay the same, because that's the nature of infinity. You just have to keep open mind so that what I know is finite, what I don't know is infinite. Those 2 things stay the same. And the other one that again, I guess it's the nature of what I said, why do I do what I do, which is kind of working with the looking forward people, is that change is the only constant. That's the only one. I don't know where those come from, but they've slipped into the lexicon, and that is true. And particularly as you say, if you come from Salford as well, you certainly know that you can't find most of the pubs that I used to drink in when I was younger. But it's a nature of mankind and human nature that that we are always changing and doing things. So change is the only constant. Again, I don't know how it's attributed, but it's definitely slipped into the lexicon.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I'm a bit of a film fan myself. I think the idea that Don Corleone likes to know bad news fast was I think good for business too, isn't it? Let's know the bad stuff as quickly as we can so we can do something about it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. No, that first one, thank you for that. I've not heard that before, but I think that's absolutely, and that says it all about this idea of not know. We know we don't know way more than we know, and therefore there's always an opportunity to learn. So, what would you say you've learned about yourself throughout your career? What are some of the insights you've had?
So when I'll go back to when I started, and I was doing, I was there recording football attendances and averaging them out. I assumed, because that's kind of how we were brought up, that I was a loner, didn't have many friends at school, not that sort of thing. I would move schools an awful lot. I went to 13 primary schools. Don't know why. We just kept moving.
Wow.
And however, what I've learned is I'm not. I can't spend New Year's Eve on my own. I need people. So the thing I've learned is that so I've learned that about myself, and then I've learned that how I don't know if I've coached it or learned it or changed it, but it's like, but there's a need to need people, which means that in one sense you want to be liked all the time. And
yes.
And the hardest thing, the hardest thing that I found for me is you can't be liked all the time, and you've got to do some stuff where you're not liked at all. And there's some stuff you're going to do that you're going to really not like either. And those are the things that that you've got to find. Those are the things I find. You've got to find the techniques to make sure that, go back from not being good or bad. I'm not a bad person. I can do this. And those are the things where you're trying to avoid the, I need to manage this in a way that, it's just the way it is. Yeah. So those are the things that I've learned. And the other thing is that when you do the really hard business things, the kind of, it's like, it's not you, it's me, and it's not the right job for you, and you've got to go different ways. That doesn't get that. It's always harder for the person receiving that message than the person giving it. But for the person giving it, it never gets easier. It never changes.
No.
And that is just a fact. So that's what I've learned. It doesn't, that doesn't get any easier, and I don't like doing it. So.
No, that's really interesting. My suggestion would be that if we're operating with the best, with the best interests in general and with respect, then we have to do tough stuff, but people will get that. I'm interested. I remember being made redundant from my first job. Yeah. And luckily I'd already got my second job, which is the business I ended up growing and owning. So it was a great thing. But the guy, I think he was known as the Axeman or something. He was the guy that comes in and makes people, and it felt like I could almost see some pleasure in his eye when he was doing this. And that was very distasteful. And yet I know when I've had to do those things, and when other people have done those to me or for me with in other businesses, if it's done with respect and care, it has to be done.
It's better, but it's never put. I mean, there's 7.8 billion people in the world at the minute. That not 7.8 billion different types, but there are lots of different types of people. And like you said, you might have had the guy who maybe took some pleasure in it. There's sometimes these things when you don't. There's some people who it doesn't matter how much you do. There's a sort of higher and lower levels of self-awareness, and the ones that are going to be the most difficult. So those things are just not easy. But in the end, I mean, what you try. And sometimes you find it a comfort. Sometimes you wonder whether it's the right thing that you said to yourself. But you go, if this isn't the right role for you, there is a right role for you out there somewhere, and you can find. But sometimes there's a lot of time has to pass before that message sinks in, and sometimes it doesn't. Yes. So that, if you look at it, that area there, it's a bit. That's kind of what those sorts of things I've learned about myself and about business, and it doesn't get any easier on those conversations for either people involved in the conversation. No,
that's fair, absolutely fair enough. And so looking forward, as you say, you like dealing with the forward people. What does the future look like for yourself, for YFM? And I'd be interested, business in general right now, we're in challenging times. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have a sort of the principle, and then the sort of the immediate. So the principle is, and I guess it probably maybe comes through. I say why I do what I do. The future is in a way that has a commonality that it's always had. It's full of opportunity, and it will always be full of opportunity, because that is human nature. There are lots of different opportunities to do lots of things, and lots of those things will get done. We'll put people on Mars. We will change the way that we consume power. We will find ways of getting water out. I drove to Rotherham at the weekend, and there's not a lot in the reservoirs at the minute. But we will find ways of doing water, and at the high level as well, being human beings, we'll also put some unnecessary barriers in our way to doing that, because that's also human nature as well. Whatever they are, or some of them unnecessary, some not. It's a big old complicated world, and getting 200 or 300 countries to agree on different things is really hard. But the fundamental thing is there will always be opportunity, and there will be a striving for change, because in the main, people are, there's a human nature drive to kind of make tomorrow better than today. Doesn't always work, but you're trying to do those things. So that's the kind of overarching thing. And I guess the advantage that you have, the real privilege that you have in the role that we at YFM do, and other people provide equity finance, is that you get to look at other people's futures, and you get to look at them not tomorrow or the day after, but we're looking at years out. We generally invested between 5 and 15 years in businesses. So
wow.
So you find that there's quite a long journey that you're going on. So you can in a way, you have to worry about tomorrow's bumps, because tomorrow's bumps will determine ultimately how much money you do and don't need. And everybody gets a bit focused on, if I need more money, I've got to sell more equity, and I've got less. But actually, at the end of the day, as I said, it's just trying to get like stuff done at the end. So you need, and to do it, it's going to take a certain amount of capital, and that how you eventually get there, you iterate towards it. It's kind of how that works. So tomorrow has got plenty of bumps in it, our tomorrow now looks quite similar in some respects to the way you were looking at things in 2008 or 2002, even, after the tech bubble burst in one and the doctor. So people were looking, thinking, looks a little bit hard out there, or looks very hard out there. And therefore businesses trying to adapt, you kind of want to make sure that you got enough money to get you to wherever you want to try and get to, and you'll probably need a bit more than you thought you were going to do, which is effectively, well, YFM was formed in 1982. YFM was originally Yorkshire Fund Managers, formed as an enterprise agency by the government. It wasn't when I joined it, but it was a private business. And it was formed in 1982 at a point when there was high inflation, high interest rates, and a paucity of equity capital for small businesses.
Yeah.
Sound familiar? So, yes. And therefore, what we've got is cash, which hopefully people will need. So the key, I think, for the businesses is to try and look to make sure you've got enough to get to do the stuff you want to do over the next period. I mean, there's lots of other things as well. I think, there's the thing that's driving people most at the moment is that you've got, which probably wasn't there in either of those two places, but was there in maybe the 1970s when I grew up, is people are now, at the consumer level, there are some people making some really hard choices between heat and eat. So, and that's probably that might play out, which means that it's going to be tough. So one of the things that we're trying to encourage all of the businesses in which we invest to do, and it's only filtering through our organization yet, so it's not got to all of the portfolio businesses, but we're saying, look, if not everybody that we employ in all of the businesses in which we invest, are on high wages, quite are on average, or hopefully, like 90% of our businesses pay at least the living wage. The lowest paid employers, not all of them pay the living wage, but most do. And we're saying to them, look, if your staff have to make choices, if you've got it at the moment, let's just make sure they can get through. So we're encouraging them to think about energy funds for the staff, just to so try and do the right thing, and run your business in a better way. Try and think of your business. And we'll try as best we can as well. So after the time that we've been invested, is that a better business? Not just in financial terms, it's making more money than it did at the point, or it's making some money, you weren't making any, whatever that is. Are you a better corporate steward? Are you a responsible corporate citizen? And do the people, so it doesn't work in all cases. We don't get all businesses to do that, but that's the sort of thing we're trying to encourage, and we've got to try and do that. And I think in times of harder need, you could, the gestures that you could make are remembered for a long time.
Yes.
That was a bit of a long rambling answer, but I hope that gives us a bit of a rounded answer.
No, thank you. It's really valuable. And makes absolute sense. So thank you for
I might have peaked then there.
that.
If that's made perfect sense, there's nowhere else to go here.
No, but it's. I mean, I think you say it's so relevant right now. I think a lot of people, as you say, domestically, but also in business, are
Yeah.
what do we do? How do we do it? Is this, and what's the right thing to do? And if people are starting or thinking of starting businesses right now, what would be the best advice you would give them?
Well, if it was a younger me, I'd say be more patient and tolerant in terms of starting business. One of the things that I think now is go back to where we were before about delight your customers. What do your customers want? Give them as much as they possibly can.
Yep.
What I would say is, but make sure that your ambition is big enough. Yeah.
Yep.
So if you've got customers and whatever you're doing, and you're thinking, right, well, I live just outside of Wigan, so I'm sat in Wigan, and I'll do that for the people in Wigan. If the people in Wigan want it, do the people in Blackburn want it? Well, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But if people in Blackburn want it, the people in Berlin want it. The people in Berlin want it. The people in Los Angeles want it. So think big enough, because ultimately the scale of your vision, which has got to be appropriate to the market. If someone else is doing it and they've got a bigger vision and there's a bigger opportunity, right? It is a competitive world.
Yep.
So make sure you're thinking big enough for your solution. Yeah. And so don't try and skip. There's a bit about when you raise the money, don't think about. Well, I mean, it is hard, this, because I think with financiers, they're often like, I've got to give you this money and make sure it lasts. Don't run out. I think you've got to try and think of it as, what I want to do is I want to get the most out of what I'm doing with this money. And if I think I need to go get some more, I'll go and do that. What's the most that I can achieve with the money that I'm going to be given? All right. And just think about it in those terms, because then you do things like efficiency and you think about waste. But what's the most impact I can have with this money? And try and think about it like that. As I said, if you what do you think of tomorrow? Tomorrow's full of opportunity. So just try and think of that. That's how we try and think of it.
That really is interesting. So from a perspective of, you talked about good and bad and feeling good or bad earlier on. I feel like there will be, well, I've met several people that have taken an investment and it's run out and feel really bad about that, and that's stopping them, for instance, going out and raising any more, or it's almost like, oh, I've done a bad thing because I promised I would do this and I didn't do it. But what I hear you're saying is, let's get rid of some of that guilt and let's just say, have you done your best with it, and is it just that you didn't realize you needed a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a real, it's almost, it's never, no, not say almost, it's never when somebody comes to you and say, I'm going to give you this sum of money here, and this is what we're going to do. This is exactly what we're going to do with it. Yeah. What happens, it's a bit like the Macmillan quote, isn't it? Events, dear boy, events. Things get in the way. Stuff happens. You're meant to hire somebody who is going to be excellent in a particular role. They turned out not to be, and the result was that puts it back a bit. It doesn't mean that the market opportunity is any better or any worse. So if you've got something that customers want and you can delight them, then you've got, then your product market fit's going to be fine. Your service delivery behind that is fine. Have I got enough money to get us to a stage where we're selling more of it than we were doing before? We've got more customers, and they're buying more of it tomorrow than they were buying, more of it today than they were yesterday. Then that's probably all good stuff. Did it take more or less money, and did we sell more or less? Well, you don't really know, but you've got to try and judge it in that opportunity. And then coming back is not a bad thing. Now, not everybody thinks like that. It's true, and it's not wrong to necessarily think, you said you were going to do this, right? You didn't do that, so we're going to now do something different, aren't we? People do think like that as well.
Yes.
We try as much as we can to say, let's do the most that we can with this, and then if we got to put more in, we will. And generally speaking, I'd say over the years, for every pound that we put in on day one, we're putting at least £1 somewhere else, and probably end up putting another £1.50 to £2. It just takes more money. Most of the time and the effort is then usually spent debating with people as to kind of who's got what percentage of what as a result of that, but also, which you get all the time. But in the end, it's much better for us, for a business, to get to the point where it's got the value, right, than not. So, and that's just, I think that is just true for everybody. And so, make sure that your vision's big enough, and you want to get the most out of the money that you've got, and there'll be a range of options that comes out of things that you will achieve with that money. It won't be just here's one target and we've either hit it or missed it. It's not as, it's more complex and nuanced than that.
Brilliant. That's really useful to hear, I think, because I suspect, I would say, I probably personally, but I suspect plenty of people feel that if they're going to take investment from an organisation like yours, we've got to be absolutely accurate. It's really interesting you said this, actually, because I work with somebody that's already successfully raised finance for an app. It's an app for what started as a dating app, now it's a social app for people with HIV, because obviously there's things about. And one of the things he's seen, and he's actually been raising money in the States as well as in the UK, and he said that the people in the US were far less concerned about the detailed financial numbers of the plan, more about the opportunity. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but it was really interesting that that was a difference he saw, that they were seeing what it could be, and they were interested in that as much as what the number said. Because as you said, I think there's a phrase in the military that I always refer to, which is no plans survives first action with the first contact with the enemy.
Exactly. So and I think that's true, but I wouldn't want you to give the impression that we don't. But we are British. So we invented cricket, so we like the numbery thing as well. So we do the numbery thing, but ultimately the numbery thing is a guide. So you're just trying to test what the scenarios are, as opposed to there is a scenario here that means we're doing enough for the next period of the journey.
I certainly wasn't referring that at all, and I totally understand it. But I think it's that openness to say, well, look, whatever your projections are, they're probably going to be different. They might be better, they might be worse, but they're probably not. And we're sort of okay with that concept that they won't be exact.
Exactly.
And that's all. I'm not saying anything other than that. But I think it's really useful, and I think the reason I raise it is I feel, and I meet lots of people that held back from even approaching the idea of taking investment because they think what it's going to be like. And I think that there's somebody banging the table every month demanding money, demanding growth, demanding return on investment. And what you're saying, what you're highlighting is it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't mean we don't have to do due diligence or effective reporting, but I believe people that will watch this will find that really interesting insight.
And the focus of our due diligence is what we call commercial or market. It's about the opportunity.
Brilliant.
There's some numbery stuff, but the real focus is commercial and people. What you like, how do you cope with change? And
I totally get it. And when I work with somebody, often we're talking about growth plans and stuff, and I say, well, what's the market size? And I've rarely met someone that knows right away. They'll guess it or average it, or we're only dealing in the Leeds area or something. But but if you went bigger, what could it be? Just so we've got that scale of where we are now and where we could be. Because I don't know what you think about this, but I often say to people, even in a severe recession, is you're just about getting to double digits of so you drop 10% or a bit more. I mean, there have been a few examples of 20%, but in general recessions, but that still means that 90% of the market still exists. So if we're a small SME business, then if we're only addressing probably less than 1% of the market, there's no reason we can't grow even in a recession. It's just we have to find the ways to grow more effectively. And the thing I often say is your marketing pound is going to go way further in a recession because people stop marketing. So, there are opportunities to grow even in challenging times.
There are indeed.
Brilliant. Well, David, it's been absolutely fascinating, and it feels like I would like to have maybe we could make something else purely talk about what you do specifically for people that would be interested. But thank you so much for your time today. And just if anyone would like to contact you or YFM for any particular reason, what would be the best way to do so?
Just drop us an email, david.hall@yfmep.com. And I think I'll just leave you one thought. If you're 18 and thinking of what you want to do, or whatever, you're just on that, I would just say, find something you like doing and do as much of it as you possibly can. And if somebody pays you for it, even better.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
All right, my pleasure. Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Bye for now.
Thank you.